Jack walked into the bar wearing his MAGA cap, and he was immediately humiliated. The bartender had no idea who he was dealing with until Jack revealed that he was the resort owner. The bartender's response marked the beginning of his downfall. What will happen next? On the beach, where warm waves lazily roll onto the white sand and the sun kisses the skin with a fierce heat, Jack, a man around 40 years old, wearing a bright red cap with the words, "Make America Great Again," walks up to the bar counter. In his hand, he holds a plastic water bottle, and on his face is that particular confident, mocking smile that irritates more than it reassures. The bartender, a young guy with tattoos and an earring, is busy mixing cocktails, not even looking Jack's way. "Hey, buddy, pour me some tequila," Jack says, settling onto a bar stool, his voice carrying a playful tone. The bartender notices the cap, scrunches his face, presses his lips together, and throws a disdainful glance at the customer. "Sorry, but we don't serve people with views like that," he responds, not taking his eyes off the cocktails. His voice is stern, almost theatrical. At that moment, a few people in the line begin to exchange glances, sensing the rising tension. Jack doesn't lose his cool. Slowly, he takes off his cap and places it on the counter, continuing to stare at the bartender with cold determination in his eyes. "Wow, did you just insult me?" he asks with a hint of sarcasm, as if it were a misunderstanding. "Or do you just not know who you're talking to?" The bartender refuses to answer, continuing to serve other customers and ignoring Jack. The crowd starts to whisper, some already pulling out their phones to capture the moment. The bartender pretends like nothing is happening, but the tension only grows. People walk by, whispering to each other. Some scoff, some pretend they don't notice. Jack remains calm, even a slight smirk appearing in his eyes. It's clear he's in control of the situation, while the bartender seems on the verge of exploding with indignation. "Do you think you can decide who sits here and who doesn't?" Jack continues, his voice becoming more confident and mocking. "Maybe I'll want to come back here with my friends, and you'll just forbid me?" The bartender, feeling his patience running out, clenches his fists. He remains silent, but his face turns red, his eyes sparking with hatred. The crowd that has gathered around begins to feel the rising tension. Some are bolder and film the scene, some laugh, while others, huddled together, watch the conflict with curiosity. I'll say it again. If you don't want to work, maybe you should leave. Jack leans forward, his voice growing quieter, but that only amplifies the sense of threat. "I'm not here to entertain you. Make a decision." The bartender can't take it any longer. He slams a towel down on the counter in frustration and loudly shouts, "Get out of here! You don't deserve to be in this bar with views like that. I'll call security." The crowd goes silent. Some don't like what's happening and quietly applaud. Others, more interested, continue to film every moment on their phones. The atmosphere is tense to the breaking point, and everyone seems to be bracing for what's to come next. Instantly, as soon as the bartender finished his shout, Jack stood up leisurely and, without changing his expression, said, "You have no idea who you're talking to, do you? I'm the owner of this resort, and you just put your job in real jeopardy." The bartender, stunned, stared at him with his mouth hanging open, unable to comprehend what was happening. Everything around them froze. The crowd began to whisper, initially unaware of what had just occurred. Shock, surprise, and laughter flashed across the onlookers' faces, shifting emotions at lightning speed. What? You're the owner of the resort?" The bartender still couldn't grasp it, his voice trembling with confusion. Jack, remaining calm, pulled out his mobile phone, slowly, almost leisurely, showing the bartender a booking notification in his name for the upcoming weeks. Jack Martin, owner of the beach resort. Silence hung in the air. The crowd sighed, and some began to laugh. A few people glanced at the bartender, who stood frozen in shock, his face turning red, his hands nervously fumbling with the towel. Jack's gaze remained as confident as ever, and his voice sounded like a quiet but firm verdict. The bartender nervously smiled, his hands trembling, but he tried to keep his composure. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything personal." But Jack, without changing his expression, smiled back, his voice playful, almost mocking. "Perfect. I'm glad you apologized. But you know what? You're fired. Next week, I'll be in the office, and we'll discuss your employment." The crowd couldn't hold it in. At first, there was a brief silence, but then the bar erupted into applause. The onlookers laughed and cheerfully exchanged remarks. The bartender turned pale, his eyes filled with panic. He nervously tried to justify himself, but Jack already ignored him. Before leaving, Jack calmly looked around, raised his hand, and loudly, so everyone could hear, said, "You know, I don't like making people lose their jobs, but if you don't respect those who pay you, there's no place for you in my business." He turned and walked away slowly, leaving the stunned bartender behind. Everyone began filming the scene on their phones, and the video quickly spread across social media. A few days later, the story of the resort owner who punished the bartender for his bias became a sensation. The bartender became the target of mockery, while Jack, quietly enjoying his vacation on his beach, turned into a local legend.